All right, welcome everybody. This is our round two, making the handoff into college and university. My name is Kyle Smith. I'm the coaching coordinator with Athletics Canada. In the background is John LaFranco, coaching manager. So he'll be in the background answering any those background questions and kind of compiling them all together. So please, as we go through, if you have questions, just type them in. Um, Before we get started, I think most of us here are pretty used to webinars and Zoom, so you're all muted. You just put them all in the question box for that. We'll leave about between probably 25 or 15 to 20 minutes for audience questions at the end. So we'll answer all those and then and go from there. This webinar will be recorded, so we'll have this available on our YouTube channel afterwards. And finally, any coaches that have entered their NCCP number will get one professional development point put on for after. Okay, so let's get going. I've got some awesome panelists for today. I'm pretty excited for this. This was a big hit last time. We went over the hour, well over the hour. Questions just kept coming in throughout. So, we're very fortunate to say thank you to come back with Brett and Kurt. I really appreciate you coming back. Carmyn, you were on last time in the back, or you were on as an audience member last time and had some feedback after, which was great. And then Coach Glenn, we're really excited to have you here as well to kind of add that input from kind of the other side now, which is good, being in the NCAA program a lot, and then also bringing your Canadian experiences. So, why don't I get you to introduce yourselves, if that's okay? We can start. Do you want to start with Carmyn? Carmyn, would you like to introduce yourself and kind of, I guess, your different roles that you have now?
Thanks, Kyle. Yes, currently I have two roles. For Athletics Alberta, I'm the technical director for coaching development. And for Athletics Canada, I'm the athlete performance advisor for the CAP athletes in the NCAA. What does CAP mean? That's our Canadian Athletics Performance Pathway Program, where we try to identify the athletes who have the realistic capacity to compete at the podium level at future World Championships and Olympic Games. Currently, we have 83 athletes on the program, and of those 83, 20 of them are NCAA Division One student athletes, and I'm like their liaison person. But in addition to being their APA, I've got over 100 other Canadians that are on my radar list. So I work to advise them too and cheer them on and all that kind of fun stuff. Prior to having these two roles, I was a head coach at the University of British Columbia for 12 years, from 1988 to 2000. And then in 2000, I went to join the NCAA program, and I was the head coach at the University of Hawaii from 2000 to 2017. And here I am back in Canada and loving what I'm doing.
This is awesome. Yeah, you just had so much different experience, so much different kind of avenues you've taken, which is really cool. Um, all right, Brett, do you want to go second?
I sure can. Good to see everybody and speak with you again if you're at the first Making the Handoff session. My name is Brett Montrose. I am one of the founders and co-CEOs at Streamline Athletes. We are the official high school to college and university recruitment partner of Athletics Canada. We are a Canadian company and we specialize in supporting athletes and their families through the recruitment process and also supporting collegiate coaches with their recruiting. So this is our bread and butter, track and field recruitment in Canada and in the United States. And I'll be reviewing some of the information that we covered last session. So I'll park my intro there and I'll go into a little bit more about what I do and what we do shortly.
Yeah, you had great presentation last time. I'm very looking forward to the second one. Coach Glenn, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I originally I'm from Calgary, Canada. I grew up in Ontario too. I did my bachelor's at University of Calgary and was part of the CIS system. And then I was looking to coach full time as a career, and there's really were not a lot of options in Canada to do that. So I chose to go to the U.S. and I did a master's degree at University of Texas, and then started coaching in different levels of the NCAA. And I started at junior college, and then coached at Central Michigan, Tulane, UCF. So I've got a big spread of a lot of different times, a lot of different levels of the NCAA experience, and some experience within Canada as well.
All right, excited to hear your side of the take of everything we talk about today. Coach Kurt, you want to go next?
Sure. Kurt Downs, head coach, president at Border City Athletics. Again, great honor to be on the call with Carmyn, sorry, Glenn and Brett as well. My history in track and field is former athlete in the Canadian system, U Sport now, competed as an NAIA athlete as well, and then began coaching at the U Sport level here in Canada as well. And then now, obviously, I'm on the other side, funneling athletes through the Canadian and the US collegiate systems.
Beauty. Okay, this is going to be good. I think we're going to start first. Brett, you had a kind of recap, I guess, a little bit of last time to get people, for those that weren't here, and just to kind of refresh our memories on some of the topics we covered. And then I think the plan is we're going to go even deeper. So yeah, does that sound good? Yes. High five.
That sounds like a
Carmyn,
plan.
is that a high five?
Actually, it wasn't, but no, all I was going to do was I was going to point out that all four of us are former student athletes of the Canadian system. Both Brett and Kurt were part of the NAI. Brett went to Simon Fraser University, and Kurt was at Windsor. And Glenn and I, we're from out west. Now, when I was an athlete, it was part of the CIAU, but I was a student athlete at the University of British Columbia. And Glenn was a student athlete with the Calgary Dinos. So it's kind of interesting that we all had similar student athlete experiences in Canada, and yet we've all kind of gone in four different directions, and yet here we are together
Here
again.
we are today. Yeah, yeah. This is good. Good point.
Thanks for mentioning that, Carmyn, because I realized I forgot to say that I was a track and field student athlete myself. And I actually had a really cool experience because, like you said, I was part of the NAIA, but I was there during our transition years into the NCAA Division II. So I went to one university, but got to compete in both the NAIA and NCAA in those years. So kind of unique experience, to say the least, being at the only Canadian NCAA school by the end of my degree. Anyways, Kyle, shoot me a thumbs up just to make sure you can see my screen. Wonderful. I'm going to jump in. This information is going to come fairly quickly because if you were on the first session, it's going to be a recap of the topics we covered previously. If you weren't there and you'd like to unpack any of these topics more, we'll try and save as much time as we can for those questions afterwards. So buckle up. Here we go. Streamline Athletes. We're a Canadian company founded in 2017. So we've been supporting the recruitment journeys of athletes and working with coaches for the last, time flies, 8 years now. Our overarching mission is to reveal opportunities for athletes so that they can move forward as confident and inspired individuals. I have introduced myself already, so I'll be very brief here. Within Streamline Athletes, in addition to my title, what I really do is provide one-on-one support for athletes and their families through our advising sessions. I also work with collegiate coaches to support their recruiting and help identify solutions to find the right athletes for their programs. And I'm focused on really centralizing key information here. So a big thing that we do differently at Streamline Athletes compared to other recruitment agencies and firms is we're trying to find genuinely good fits rather than selling a promise or a dream to athletes for really high prices and then really just making introductions to as many coaches at the collegiate level as possible. We work with the coaches to understand their recruitment standards, the GPAs or average percentages that they need academically to get kids into school. And then we're helping athletes set realistic expectations and goals along the way. and just to genuinely overall help more athletes and more Canadian athletes continue the sport at the next level, because there's more roster spots available than get used every year. And we just want to make sure that, if there's 7 or 8% of high school student athletes who are continuing on to the college and university level, we're playing a small part in bringing that number up to 10% or higher over time. The landscape, we'll touch more on what all of this stuff means, I'm sure, throughout the presentation. But overall, there are over 1,700 schools. Glenn mentioned he's been involved in everything from JUCO to the NCAA. And when we add up all those schools, 1,700 or more of them have at least one of a men's or women's cross country or track and field program. That's broken down into a bunch of different divisions and associations, but the ones that we speak about most commonly here as Canadians are the NCAA, which has 3 different divisions, the NAIA U Sports, which is the Canadian 4-year university programs, the CCAA, the Canadian Collegiate Athletics Association. These are more commonly 2-year diploma programs in Canada. And then we also have the NJCAA, which has a couple of different divisions within that association, and other JUCO associations as well, including the California JUCO Athletics Association. So that's the landscape in a nutshell. Moving on, a lot of the questions that we'll be talking about today and some of the answers that I'll give will probably come back to what I have found myself calling the 4 buckets of recruitment from the athlete and parent and high school coach perspective. The decision-making process for where to pursue school is dictated by a whole bunch of different factors, but for the most part, they can be grouped into these 4 buckets: academics, athletics, location, and budget. So some example questions for what athletes, parents, and coaches can be asking themselves along the way are on the screen here. And just know that if I mention the 4 buckets today, I'm trying just to save some breath saying academics, athletics, location, budget. Scholarships, always a hot topic. I know we went into probably quite a bit more detail than this last time, but the important information here, 2 different types, athletic and academic. Really important to know that full ride scholarships, we hear that term being tossed around all the time, especially among high schoolers and athletes who are aspiring to move on to the next level. Just know that full ride athletic scholarships are rare, and they're becoming increasingly challenging to get at the NCAA level, especially among those top programs. And that partial scholarships are great as well, and that they do exist in Canada and in the United States. So if the takeaway here, full rides are hard to get, they do exist, but you can make the financial puzzle work by potentially stacking your athletic and academic scholarships. And sometimes a partial is all that the coaching staff has available to make it work. When it comes to Canadian schools, it's key to know that they can only cover tuition with any athletic scholarship funding, whereas in the States, they're able to cover things like housing, books, and other costs outside of just the tuition piece. In Ontario, there's a cap. I believe it's $4,500 currently total athletic scholarship that can be given out. That said, tuition and cost to attend to Canadian school as a Canadian student athlete tends to be significantly lower than going to school stateside. So a smaller scholarship in Canada can actually still leave you with a much smaller out-of-pocket price tag, even compared to sometimes a 50 or 75% scholarship in the States. Athletic scholarship, the decision maker tends to be the director or head coach of the program. So the event coach might be who you're in conversation with throughout the recruiting process. And then the head coach or the director of the program would be the ultimate decision maker on how that team's scholarship gets used. Academic scholarships are determined through the university itself. And again, they can just be a great way to augment the athletic scholarship money that you're able to get along the way. Can also be a great conversation starter when you're talking about budget with a coach. With a GPA of X, would I qualify for some academic funding? And then if the coach is really interested in recruiting you, he or she may try and help you figure out that financial puzzle, and the athletic scholarship piece comes up a little bit more organically that way than, hey, coach, what's my athletic scholarship going to be? So just a little tip there. This is a different slide than you would have seen last time if you were on the call. It's simplified. Every coach has their own method for recruitment, their own tools and resources. But as a general rule of thumb, they qualify athletes through a funnel that resembles something like this. Athletes need to meet athletic performance standards. Usually coaches will have two sets of standards. One is going to be walk-on performance standards, and the other is going to be their scholarship consideration standards. If athletes don't meet either of those, then typically those aren't going to be targeted recruits for those coaches. Academically, simply put, you need to be able to get into the university in order to be on the roster. So there might be, I was talking to a Division II school this week, and if you don't have a 3.7 GPA coming out of high school, which is very high, then they can't get you in. So just make sure that if you're a high school coach or a parent or even an athlete who's on this call, coaches can't bend the rules of the university. Maybe they used to be able to do that, but we don't see that happening anymore. Next up, budget. Coaches, I call it the financial puzzle, because coaches are, especially if you're Canadian considering an American opportunity, they're going to try and figure out what your budget looks like, what you can afford out of pocket for school, what you'd qualify for academically, and then what they need to layer in there athletically to make this a feasible opportunity for you. So eventually we get down to a commitment or a signing. Also important to keep in mind that there's a ton of other factors that go into how coaches recruit, such as who the athlete is as a person. That's what I mean by intangibles. What they need on their roster. A good example of this could be a coach's university or varsity program is graduating 3 hammer throwers in 1 year. That means that they might be more inclined to be providing scholarships for incoming hammer throwers than they would be in another recruitment year. And this varies from school to school, coach to coach, year to year. So keeping in mind that, you might be a top recruit this year, but you might not be, or you might be a top recruit at another school. So not everything is personal. Sometimes it's roster need related. And then geographic location, visits, and all those sorts of things layer into the decision-making process for coaches. The timeline, I will buzz over this one here. For athletes in grade 9 and 10, this is certainly time to start thinking about what the future looks like, doing well in school, and making sure that you're taking the right classes, especially in grade 10, for eventual acceptance into universities and colleges in Canada and the United States. Important to note that until following the 15th of June, in or after your grade 10 year, NCAA coaches can't technically talk to you about recruitment. So it's not a huge time for reaching out to coaches. It's not a huge time for making any decisions, but it's really important to start thinking what you'd like your future to look like. And again, just considering those 4 buckets that we already talked about. Grade 11 might be the most important year for student athletes looking to be recruited. If you're on time and on schedule, this is typically the last indoor and outdoor track and field season that you're going to have to hit personal bests before you're making your university decision. By the time your grade 12 outdoor season rolls around, ideally you've already committed to the university that you've been accepted into, and that's all wrapped up. So with that said, the academics are vital in grade 11 as well. Those are going to be the marks that coaches are looking at. Those are going to be the marks that you're applying to the universities with. Grade 12. Here, coaches are allocating their scholarship budget and announcing signings that may have been verbal commitments previously. We see coaches using all of their athletic scholarship budget up by October, November of the athlete's grade 12 year, technically. So the year before they'd start. Their 2025 class, for example, may have been fully tapped by Christmas time of 2024. However, some coaches spread that out a little bit more to make sure that they have some scholarship availability for flexibility into the new year. This time of year, March would be considered a little bit later in the recruitment process. We are working with coaches who are fully done with recruiting for 2025 and are only focused on 2026 and even some 2027 conversations at this point in time. I stress the importance of academics in grade 11, but in grade 12, you still need to finish high school very strong because you will ultimately need to be accepted into the university, which is usually conditional on your status upon graduation. So just because you make that commitment in early in grade 12, still need to graduate in really good academic standing to make sure that all the planning and work that you've done can come to fruition. Last time we spoke, I went over some tips for high school coaches, so I will reiterate those really quickly for everybody here today. There's some key ways that high school coaches or coaches of high school student athletes can support their athletes with their post-secondary goals. First and foremost, supporting a healthy relationship with the sport, I find to be so key for these kids, and maybe the most important thing. If they don't genuinely enjoy jumping, throwing, running, hurdling, whatever it is that they're doing, then they're not in the best space to make a commitment to do that for the next 4, 5, 6 years and beyond, potentially. So that's, I think, one of the most important roles of a high school coach from somebody who works strictly in the recruiting spot. Just making sure the relationship with the sport is a healthy one. Encouraging good academics is key, and then helping them to set attainable athletic goals along the way. When it comes to what that means for recruitment, that's something that we can help with at Streamline Athletes, is letting you know what kind of targets coaches at different levels of the collegiate landscape are looking for, and then using those as something that athletes can strive for this season or next season. In terms of working with the athlete and their families, it depends on, I guess, the coach's relationship with that family and with that athlete, but collaboration, I think, is key here, having those conversations and just helping the athlete and the family be thinking about the 4 buckets, asking good questions. Next one, this one is one that I often discuss more with the parents or guardians of student athletes, but I've spoken to coaches. Glenn, maybe you could back this one up, but typically coaches at the collegiate level throughout the recruitment process want to have conversations with the athlete that they're recruiting and not with mom or dad all the time.
100%.
So I would say the same thing extends to the athlete's high school coach. I encourage parents, guardians, high school coaches to pay super close attention to their athletes, understand the recruitment process, and be collaborative in the process. But when it comes to meeting with the collegiate coaches, please let the student athlete be the center of that conversation. And it's just important in the recruitment process. Coaches, especially if the athlete is moving out of state, out of province, or even out of country, they're taking a gamble on if this kid's going to be, okay relocating and being on their own. So they're not looking for someone who's making the decisions for the athlete. They're looking for some independence and some decision making to come from the person who's going to be a full-blown adult away from home and part of their program for the next several years. Lastly, this point came from a conversation that I'd had prior to our first session back in October. And I think here, my thought process was that I'd heard from some parents who had mentioned that the coach of their son or daughter was a little bit too, you know, how do I phrase this? A little bit too hands-on and wanted to control the entire recruitment process. So they almost felt bad seeking out additional support or additional resources. So my takeaway here was just that a good way to help athletes along is to understand that there are organizations like ours who are only here to help, and we're happy to collaborate with you. So don't take it personally that, if you're coaching the athlete to run their fastest 400 or 800 ever, it doesn't mean that you necessarily need to have all the information about every part of the recruiting process. There's some help that's available, and families might be looking for that. And we're happy to talk to coaches just as much as we are athletes and families. All right, almost at the end of this recap here. There's a bunch of different ways that we can help. The two that I wanted to mention today are if you are the coach or parent guardian of a high school athlete who's looking for some support with the recruitment process, we do have a free account, which is called the Essentials account, that athletes can sign up for. They create a profile with us. They can get contacted by collegiate coaches. They can keep track of the conversations they're having. They can put some of their dream schools onto a list and update it with their PRs. We verify all those performances for coaches. So it's a great way just to keep track of your recruiting process and hear from coaches where you meet their standards. Next up, we do personalized advising sessions. 99.9% of these sessions are with me one-on-one, where I meet with athletes and their families. And we really use those 4 buckets as the guide. And I send over a personalized plan afterwards that kind of lays out actionable next steps for the family to take. Again, these are unbiased, and I'm just trying to provide the best information I can. There's no incentive for me to be making an athlete sign in a certain place or not. But a lot of the time, an athlete will come to me and say, Oregon, Texas, Florida, Georgia, that's my list. And I'm saying, okay, you're a fantastic athlete, but let's take a look at what the historical recruitment data says and the performances of some of these athletes that get scholarships to those schools you just mentioned. Also, there's another 250, 300 schools in Division I alone that we can take a look at, and Division II could be an option for you. So I'm just trying to help set realistic expectations and goals for athletes. I meet with you for an hour, and through our partnership with Athletics Canada, there's a promo code AC10, 10% off that advising session. But feel free to email me if you have any questions about that first. Okay, that's it for me, unless there's any questions that are directly related to some of that rapid fire recap info I just went through. If not, I'll send it over to you, Kyle.
No, this is great. So that's exactly it. That was a fantastic recap. You talked about the 4 buckets. That came up a lot in our conversation last time, but really hammering that in. And then also the thing that stuck out for me was the timeline of when to get your stuff in order, and just that idea, because we had questions last time about, I did my stuff in grade 12, what do I do? And kind of really helping people take that breath and, really go through the process and kind of getting everything down. So the 4 buckets really stood out in my mind. And then your step-by-step process and really focusing on that grade 11 and grades mattering throughout. And then, I think we'll get through them after, but about like specific questions during that recruiting process, that was fantastic. So yeah, can you can you pull that up one more time? Just if anyone wants to take a screen caption of your details right there, it'll also be available. So just, this is also, like I said, it'll be on YouTube as well, but if you need to take a screen caption, you need to write this down. Like, you are here to help, and, you're offering a promo, AC's got a promo code for this as well. So like, you are here to kind of give that guidance, give that support, and really walk athletes through because it's a complex thing of really navigating it, and it's not something you want to rush. So thank you for filling that in. Okay, let's get everybody talking. So this was great. So I guess my first question through this is like, thinking of coaches, like, what do we play in this process? And then how can we really help athletes figure this out? I guess thinking about through this recruitment, Kurt, would you want to go first in this about, how can we help these athletes get through this process?
I think obviously, I think it's a good question. I think first and foremost, it's kind of one of those full circle type of answers where you're trying to insulate the athlete to the best of your ability and provide as much information to help them make as good an educated decision as possible. I think first and foremost, is being realistic with the athlete and letting them know, do your grades align with your goals? Do your performances align with your goals? I think that those two are sort of massive, big rocks when you're looking at the recruiting picture. I've had, I've again been fortunate to send a lot of kids away to school, and both in Canada and the U.S. And oftentimes, that's the biggest discrepancy, is where they see themselves and where the potential for them to possibly go is. Sometimes you just have to make it realistic. So I think that me as a coach, I think that's looking at that and analyzing that, I think is probably step one. I think the second thing that I think would be most important after that is something that Glenn and Brett both mentioned, which was making sure that the athlete is the one doing the talking. I always say to athletes right away, I don't want to be on the hook if you don't fall in love with this school later on. It's not my decision. I've been to school, I've been done running track and field for years. It's not a decision for me. It's a decision for you and your family. And I've had athletes that have made decisions not to go to certain schools that I thought they should probably go to. I mean, I didn't voice that to them, but they made a decision based on a grandparent being in the same state, spending 6 months of the year in the same state and then being able to see that grandparent. That was important to them. I've had other athletes make decisions on, a vacation spot for their parents, that they wanted to be in, close enough to be able to travel with a parent. I've had other athletes that have wanted to stay in the state of Michigan, because it's so close to Windsor. So all of these things are family decisions, that, you hope that the athlete is making the most educated decision. And my part in that is trying to be as honest with them in the process, if that makes sense. Again, it may not be the most logical decision from an athletic standpoint, but maybe it makes more sense from an academic standpoint. Maybe it makes more sense from, a parental situation. Who knows? But I think that that's the two best ways to sort of view or the lenses to look at it from.
I think that's fantastic. You got to give them the information, and you got to just so they can make, because that's it. It's them. They're 17, 18, but it is a decision that they do need to think about. Does anyone else want to add in, or does that sound about? I think so, right? That's exactly it. I think that. Okay, so then kind of feeding into what you had said, you want to talk to, you both said, Glenn and Brett, you both said, and then Kurt, you echoed it about, you want the athlete to talk, but like as university coaches, do you not want to hear what what the high school coach is doing? Do you want to know about their program and kind of what they've been focusing on? Like, do you have those conversations with the high school coach?
Yes, I usually speak to the high school coaches, the club coaches. You want to get a feeling for what kind of training they've been doing. Like, are they coachable? Are they someone that's like okay with hearing something new? Sometimes you've had these kids that maybe have like parents that coach them since they were kids, and they're kind of really stuck in what they're going to do, and they're not flexible and open to things. So you want to get a little feel of what the environment is that the athlete is dealing with. And as a coach, like went on the last topic, like just you can do a lot of good as far as like maybe filtering some of the information so the athlete knows what's going on. Like sometimes the kids will look at a program and they'll see like, oh, they had this one good athlete, and they don't really understand that athlete was already good. And you can do a lot of pretty good statistical analysis when you look at stuff like TFERS, and see how do the programs have athletes, how good are they? Are they developing year over year? I think that's something that's a little above the head of a lot of the athletes. And so as a Canadian coach, if you want to help them out, that can be a really valuable thing to be able to do. Have they had success in your event area? Do they look like they're going to stay there for a while? That's another thing too, because coaches tend to go wherever the best opportunity is. And if a coach is kind of hitting above their weight, then they might be on the way out before for too long for the better salary or better job.
That's true. That's it. That's it. I guess you do go, very much like, okay, that program, that coach specifically has, exactly that. And then that's a whole other, and that's happened many times. You hear that happen quite a bit, which would be quite nerve-wracking. Okay. So that kind of eats into, or I guess goes into my next one, is then for those thinking about transferring. So, that idea. So how does the transferring process work? I guess kind of looking, um, through Canadian universities. I mean, there's a few different, I guess, ways of you think transferring. So Canadian, American to American, or, Canadian to American or American to Canadian. I know that's a lot. That's a big pot, but what is the transferring process? How does that look for the athlete, and what do they need to do? Do you want me to, anyone want to start on? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Coach
could take
Glenn. Yeah.
that. I mean, in the NCAA, I'm not too familiar as far as like Canadian to the US. It's kind of wide open, technically there's kind of like a gentleman's agreement that you're not supposed to coach, talk to athletes from recruit them out of the NCAA or CIS or U Sports, I guess it's called now. It's changed names so many times. But still, like it's kind of broken fairly commonly. And there's so many connections between like club coaches and all that to kind of figure out if you can get someone out of there. But you don't see a ton of Canadians going to the NCAA from NCAA Canadian universities. Within the US, it's kind of the wild, wild west now. There's some people that have been 4 different universities in 4 years now. They keep making the rules kind of like all for what they think is the benefit of the student athlete instead of programs before. Before it used to be everyone was protected quite a lot. And if you wanted to transfer, you had to sit out a year and there was pretty strict guidelines. Now, I mean, it's wide open for the most part. And I don't know that it's going to change too much in that way. But transferring it's a big deal, if you're going to transfer, you should probably know that you really want to transfer and you might not change your mind because once you decide you're going to transfer, your scholarship isn't guaranteed for much further than that semester. So, and some schools, if you're a real star at that school, they might want to keep you, and whatever they can to keep you, they'll do. But if you're kind of struggling a little bit or you're kind of borderline and you say you want to transfer, they'll be happy to kind of show you the door and use that scholarship on someone else that could contribute. So you have to make sure that you are, really want to go before you have that very difficult conversation with your coach about, hey, I've got to move on here because it's not comfortable for anyone.
Yeah, I could see that, exactly that. Like you mention it, and then all of a sudden they're okay, because you don't want, exactly, you as the coach, you don't want them to be unhappy. So, because then that's creating a whole other dynamic that you don't want in the program. And okay, what about Canada to Canada? How does that look? Or Carmyn, were you going to add in more? You popped in.
No, I was just going to echo what Glenn said. It's so easy, like within the NCAA, to jump in the transfer portal and switch schools and stuff. The only limiting factor is as you get older, you got to be, or not older, but further into your career down there, making the academic requirements at the next school. So it's really easy when you're a freshman, but as you move on to junior and seniors, like the third and fourth year, there's a lot more restrictions on whether or not the next school can accept you because you just don't make the academic requirements. So that would be the only limiting factor. But yeah, you don't want to just jump in the portal to explore your options. We have had a few Canadians do that, and then it's like, yeah, toodaloo. Like you enter the portal, we're keeping your scholarship and it's gone. So what I really advise athletes to do is have that, like if you're unhappy with what's going on, have the conversation with your coach, see if things can be worked out. Because the coaches want to keep you. I mean, they recruited you, so they don't want to see you leave. So see if you can make that work first, and then if you try and then it doesn't, and you do know that you want to transfer, then okay, jump in the portal. But just know that if you're in the portal, there's no going back. And so unless you've got some pretty good spots to potentially go to, it's a bad idea. Yeah, it's easy to do. You got to make the grade, but make sure you have that conversation with your coach. And the other good thing too is if you have that conversation with your coach and your coach realizes that, yeah, well, you know what, maybe it would be better to go to another school. At least you maintain a good relationship with that coach for, down the road. So if you see that person at a track meet, I mean, you're still on friendly terms, but don't just jump in the portal without having that conversation, and know that once you're in there, you're not going back. So do it the best way. And I've seen some Canadians do it well, very well, and I've seen one or two not do it well. So that's my only advice there.
I could add a little bit, Kyle, if you still want to stick on this question for a moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. First couple things. First one I'll mention is I've had this question coming up more and more frequently, and I think it's because we're seeing transfers happen more frequently, especially within the NCAA, where student athletes are committing to a school out of high school within Division I, or maybe, within Division I in most cases. And then they're having a couple of years that go pretty well. And then perhaps now they're on the radar of some of those Power 5 NCAA schools. So a transfer becomes an option for them. Now, since we're seeing that, what's happening among high school athletes and their families is maybe the recruitment path for me is to plan that transfer into my recruitment journey. And I typically would advise student athletes not to seek out their first university option out of high school with the intention of transferring. It can be a really challenging process. And as Carmyn mentioned, you do need to meet certain academic requirements, but in almost all cases, you're actually losing credits in that transfer process as well, because maybe 75% of the courses that you've taken in your first couple of years of university could transfer over to the new one. But now you're going to have to retake classes that maybe you've already taken or replace them with new credits at the next school. So sometimes the best route is to consider what the best option would be for you directly out of high school, what your pathway and your individual development as a student, as an athlete would look like competing at that school for all 4 years, maybe going to school for 5 and redshirting one along the way could be an option depending on how long your studies take. But typically I would advise against planning that transfer into the process. With that said, the other question you had, Kyle, I think was within Canada, U Sports to U Sports. This one, it's not quite as structured with a portal like the NCAA now has. But my advice there would be careful with it, because you could end up having to sit out a year.
Okay.
That doesn't happen as frequently anymore with the new rules in the NCAA, but it can still happen when you switch schools within Canada. So the main takeaway here is look into all the compliance rules and talk to someone who you trust and knows the system really well before you make any decisions like entering the portal in the NCAA or contacting another coach within U Sports because you're sick of your coach or something like that. Just tread carefully and know that there's impacts on your athletic eligibility, and there are impacts on your academic progress as well.
So this is where doing your due diligence ahead of time, talking to the athletes, talking to the coaches, doing those recruiting trips all come into play to kind of really help minimize this chance to have that. Okay. No, I appreciate that. Was good. That's good. This is the discussions we want to have. Okay, so thinking about social media, it's kind of, been a big part of recruitments now. You can see me, see what I run, see what I throw. My performances are there. Also from the other side of things of what I promote and how my platform would be. Do university coaches actively look at, an athlete's social media account, and what do I guess need to be mindful of, kind of in this situation as a high school athlete, looking to be recruited? Coach Glenn, you want to go?
Sure, yeah. One thing I'd advise is just make sure you're visible.
Okay.
Sometimes people have kind of awkward names in their thing, and you can't find them. And so that can be a bit of an impediment when you're trying to recruit kids. Another thing too, if a coach follows you, follow them back. You don't sometimes you know, it might be at a program you're not totally sure you fit into or you want to go to. But as your options change, sometimes those little relationships that you build on the process can come in your handy later on too. So, you know, we do look at social media, kind of want to see who this person is, what type of things they like to talk about, and you know, if you're sort of extra superficial, talking about stuff that maybe isn't doesn't show good character, then we can weed you out. You know, from girls doing extremely provocative clothing things and stuff like that, all kinds of different things you might see. Guys, you know, saying inappropriate stuff or whatever online. Yeah, just keep in mind that your audience is everyone that followed you, and that can be a huge number of people, not just your friends in high school. So you need to be mindful of those things and then be easily found.
Kurt, do you ever have those talks with the athletes ahead of time? Because it can
Yeah,
be, yeah.
absolutely. You know, I think Glenn touched on a really good point. What I often tell the athletes to do is make a track and field account. You know, make a separate track and field account. Keep your own account private. I mean, you're a minor anyway, so you know that account should be private. And I say make a track and field account. Put all of your bests marks athletically and academically right in the information area. You know, put the picture of yourself on there so it's visible. They know which events you do, and then make sure that you're as you post, put what it is, this date, this meet, where was the location, what the PR was, put all those things out there. And when coaches reach out to you, or if you're reaching out to a coach, share that information with them. So, you know, as Glenn said, it's visible, it's there, it's out front, it's right there for the coach to know and to see. And also keep it very professional. Your first name and your last name, your high school, the club that you're with. Tag them in it so that it's very easy for coaches to find you. A lot of times, athletes will put, you know, like, you know, some ridiculous name with a whole bunch of numbers and some other things. And, you know, Carmyn as a coach can't find them. You know, Brett trying to, you know, advocate for them can't find them. Glenn looking for them can't find them. So make yourself as easily, you know, as easy to find as you possibly can.
That's yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, one, like you said, it should be private, right? Private accounts, private. And then I really like that idea of having that kind of professional account where you can find it and it's very simplistic that people can find. Yeah. Carmen, you look like you're ready to add in.
Well, I was just going to tell a little story, but when Facebook first started, and this is when I was at the University of Hawaii, one of our athletes went on Facebook and said how much she thought her boss was a jerk, and da 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 da. Well, next day when she showed up for work, she was fired. Um, there were some other athletes that posted pictures of them, you know, drinking down at the beach, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they came to practice the next day, they were suspended. So yeah, what you post on there, that tells a lot about the person's character, and there are consequences and all that stuff stays on there. So especially when you're being recruited, sure, you send in your transcript, sure, you tell them you've run this time or jumped this high, that sort of stuff. But when it comes to the character, coaches are going to be checking out those social media sites to find out what the person's really like. So it is important, and it's definitely used by coaches.
And that and what people tag you. That's the other thing. That's what I remember going through school and learning that as well, making sure people don't tag you on things. But there's the professional and personal accounts right there. Um, awesome. Okay. This is good. Okay. So Carmen, specifically, you've had a lot of, or a vast majority of experience throughout this. You know, and so just curious with your coaching and coach development, you know, you've seen a lot of changes with the recruitment process. Have you noticed how it's kind of evolved and when it comes to kind of the Canadian and university, or Canadian and American universities and kind of, you know, is there any kind of trends you've noticed that as a coach we should kind of be aware of or be mindful of?
Okay, I guess that's a nice way of saying that I'm old, but that's okay. I get it.
Experience is
But
key.
But yeah, back in the day when I first started coaching, before there was the internet, I mean, recruiting was by phone calls and sending letters with stamps on it, and going to track meets and seeing athletes and stuff like that. There wasn't that social media side of things,
Mhm.
and that's how it was done. It was a very kind of a small world, sort of who you know, and or coaches would reach out to the college coaches and say, "Hey, I've got this athlete, and I think you should look into this person," and that was about it. So basically, it was very simple and straightforward, and there was no problems. Nowadays, with the internet, I mean, there's just so many more layers, and coaches. I mean, a lot of coaches are getting burnt out because so much of their job is based
Oh,
on recruiting, and you got to be watching the results. You got to be watching the rankings. And there's back in the day, if an athlete wanted to go to a school and check it out, they could do that. But nowadays, there's official visits where your expenses are paid to go visit that school, and up until last year, it was like limited to 5 visits per year. Well, that's out the window. You can go to as many schools as you want for visits. But yeah, there's just so much going on with the recruiting now and what's available to coaches. So what I would just say is just, keep it simple. Share with the coaches your academic situation. Like, be proactive. Like, you got to know what it is that you want out of your post-secondary education. And first of all, is the academics. What is it that you want to study? Do you have a preference? Where is do you want to stay close to home? Do you want to go further away? So you got to look at basically we're talking about the 4 buckets. But before you start, don't just sit back and wait for the phone calls to come in with people offering scholarships. You need to know what it is that you want, what it is that you're looking for, and be proactive. And with my AC role, I guess when people see the letters NCAA as part of my job description, I get a lot of calls from parents and athletes saying, "Hey, what school should I go to?" And I am not in the business of that. I mean, there's so many factors that are involved with what school is the best fit. But what I always do is tell them to join Streamline Athletes. That's where they can go to get all their questions answered. Find out that there's 1,700 schools in North America to go to, and then for sure there's got to be like 10 of them that might be a good fit. And the fact that Streamline Athletics is affordable, transparent, and full of information. So that's what I recommend everybody to do. And then from there, Brett can guide them along the process. And he's got no biases. I mean, no one's paying him to get athletes to go to their school. It's all upfront, affordable, and informative. In fact, I was talking to an athlete at the Alberta Indoor Championships this past weekend that joined one of those American recruiting companies and spent $1,500 to join that organization, all to have the recruiter there kind of funnel an athlete in a particular direction. Streamline Athletics is not, or athletes is not like that. Like I said, it's affordable, it's transparent, and there's a ton of information. So anyway, when people ask me what school I should go to, I refer them to Brett.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, this is it. Well, one, perfect promotion there. That's fantastic. But I mean, that just shows exactly why 1AC is part of this, right? You just back that, Brett. This is exactly it. This is perfect. This is why you're on here as well, right? To kind of reiterate these important points of the process. You're a face that people can see now, and that you're a person, and you're here for the to help athletes through this. And you've guided through the buckets. Start early, just what Carmyn said. Just like know your things, Think about this early. So this is great. That's some great feedback, Carmyn. Thank you. Okay, we gotta be mindful of time, so I'm going through my questions really quick. I've got 17, so there was a lot there. Looking through here. Okay, so one did come in, so I'm just gonna read this. This is from Coach Max here. Can you please explain how the NCAA U Sports eligibility years work? Specifically, if an athlete starts in a Canadian system and transfers to the NCAA. So, just those. Yeah, sorry, that's my dog. I have a dog. Yeah, I guess Brett, do you want to talk through that? And I'm gonna mute me.
Sure. It looks like Kurt might have some insight as well, but I happen to have this in front of me on my screen here. So transferring from Canada to the US. What's important here to know is that U Sports experience does count against your 4-year eligibility in the NCAA. The NCAA also has the eligibility clock, which is a different metric for tracking eligibility. So a couple different factors here. How many years of eligibility have you used in U Sports, cross country, and or track and field? And how long has it been since you graduated high school? And those two things both work. Typically, if someone goes straight from high school into U Sports, that's going to be the more important one because your eligibility clock is going to be a little bit longer than that. I'll keep the answer short there because that might answer it. Coach Max, if you need more info, jump in the question box and let me know. We can unpack it more. And then Kurt, if you've got anything there, feel free to chime in, please.
Oops, sorry. Thanks, Brett. Having had some athletes come back from the US to Canada, obviously understanding that you have subsequent years. So for instance, more recently, I think 2018, 2019, had an athlete return with 1 year of eligibility from the ACC conference. Once she got that note to certify that she had that 1 year of eligibility remaining, we then sent that to U Sport, the OUA, and University of Windsor, in which case she was given 2 years of eligibility upon her return from a U.S. institution. So from what I understand, if you have 1 year of eligibility and you return to the Canadian institution, you would have 2 years of eligibility remaining. As long as, because again, that eligibility clock isn't the same here in Canada as it is in the US.
Okay, perfect. That I like that. Okay, so we're getting close on time. Going through. Okay, there's a lot of questions I wanted to ask. Okay, so when evaluating scholarship offers, are there any red flags athletes and coaches should be on the lookout for? And then are there specific questions to help kind of guide athletes in making these informed decisions? So just thinking of just boom, what are some quick things I need to really pay attention to? Coach Kurt, you got any thoughts?
Sure. I normally have athletes first and foremost just ask the coach what their typical cycles look like as they train. It's important for them to get a feel of the coach and how they train. I don't think they have to per se look at them, but just to understand if there's 4 hard sessions in a week, and as an athlete, maybe you've only done 1 or 2. That might be a potential red flag for an athlete going into an institution, meaning they might not be able to handle that sort of volume or load. And that freshman year may be more of a learning experience, or it might be more of a high density type of load than they might be able to handle. Another question might be along the lines of, finding out if that coach would allow them to compete in the summer. There's a lot of programs that want athletes to be done once their obligations for their high school, or sorry, for their colleges are done in April or May or possibly June, and they don't want them to compete the rest of the year. They just want them to train. So that might be a situation for that athlete where they may have dreams of competing and representing Canada in the summer. They might need to have that discussion with the coach at that university just to make sure that that's a possibility for them as they move forward. So I normally say ask those types of questions when talking to coaches. In addition to that, I would also say, obviously, the academic. What's the academic load like? If you're in engineering, maybe there's a certain number of classes that you need. Are those going to conflict with practice? Is that going to conflict with a practice schedule or a travel schedule? I know a lot of times athletes, if you're on the West Coast, similar to Carmyn was, at that point in time, you might have to leave on a Tuesday or a Wednesday to go to a meet. How many classes are you going to miss? Are you going to be able to make those up? Do you have extra tutorials or whatever the situation is, if you have eyes on being a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer, or whatever it is that you're looking for. So I would say thinking about those types of questions to make sure that you're in line with what the coaches want from you and what you want post your athletic career.
Those are good points. Absolutely. Because you're right, the traveling. Yeah. Carmen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, that's a great point that Kurt brought up about traveling and academics. We have an athlete, a Canadian in the NCAA right now, and he has chemistry classes on Thursdays. And if and not just him, but if anybody in the class misses 3 chemistry classes, then boom, they fail. And so when it comes to travel, that makes things a little bit tricky, especially with this course being on a Thursday. But yeah, you got to think of things like that. Make sure that your academic plan is going to match or be compatible with the practice schedule and the competition schedule. And there's some academic programs. It's like, look, this course is offered on this day at this time, and you need to take it. Then in that case too, then coaches may have to be a little bit flexible too to allow that to happen, because after all, they are student athletes and they're there to get a degree. So, but just things to be aware of. It's not just easy peasy. There's all these other little factors to think about.
All right. Just looking to see if Brad or Glenn, you wanted to add it,
Yeah,
but I think that, yeah.
I could.
Oh,
The
hands up. Yeah.
question, Kyle, just to go back to it, was it about negotiating scholarship or questions to ask in the scholarship conversation specifically?
Sorry.
Was the question about the scholarship conversation specifically?
Just going through. I think it was more just just potential flags that you would notice, like from the whole process. So
Okay.
of going through. So it could like getting there, and the idea of analyzing the program, looking through, um, potentially even just dealing with a coach, even, and just dealing, having those conversations, or even after, just some, as through that recruitment process, if potential red flags that you might see of being like, oh, wait a minute, no, this is I need to jump on this, or I need to other way, like, nope, this is not. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go rapid fire here. I could talk about this probably for a long time. So I'll say a few things that come to mind really quick. Red flag, if the coach isn't willing to spend the time in your initial conversations to help you put together the financial puzzle from your perspective. So not understanding what the athlete's budget might look like, what the academic scholarship situation could look like. It might even mean being upfront about the fact that the scholarship offer from the athletic side is going to be smaller than expected. That's not necessarily a red flag, but them not telling you that or taking the time to understand your financial puzzle might be a suggestion that you're not a top priority recruit for that coach. Other red flags would be scholarship offers that usually they're pretty good with this now, but there are cases that you hear of every once in a while where that scholarship no longer applies if you get injured or is subject to going away in your second, third, or fourth year if you're not hitting certain expectations athletically. And then a big one that's super obvious, I think, is that if a coach is asking you to come for a visit, but it's not an official visit that's funded by the school, they're asking you to pay out of pocket to pop by and visit them in office hours, then I don't think that's a very green flag. So those are a few that came to mind. I just wanted to mention really quick.
One thing that I'd add to this is just like, look how many people are coming in and out of that school. Now, like in a lot of the Power Four schools, almost every school has like a 4-year scholarship now. And the mid majors are a little bit different, and D2s and stuff like that. But although it might be a 4-year school scholarship, they have ways of making you feel uncomfortable to leave. So there's a lot of times people get kind of nudged out, even though they might have a scholarship that's guaranteed that amount. But then, they take away your opportunities, or they just make it so you're uncomfortable. I've seen some nasty stuff, honestly, with some of these situations, because these teams they're in it to win. And if they have people on scholarship money that aren't able to contribute, then they don't want you around, honestly. It's a, how do you win? It's like, how many points can you get for every one of the scholarships? And if there's people that aren't able to contribute, then, people will find a way to move them on is the term that the NCAA coaches to use. So just watch it. Are people coming in and out of this program a lot? When you're on your visit, talk to the athletes and kind of feel for, and when you're in a private room, how is the coach really, what is it really like here? And I've heard some people have just like, hey, don't come here, and stuff like that. Like, not at my particular schools, but I've heard lots of recruit stories like that. So just like, don't be afraid to ask tough questions. And like, sometimes, they'll say it kind of all roses, but then when you get them alone and the coach isn't around or something, you'll find a little more details of what's really going on there. So look at how much turnover is at that school, because they have ways of making you want to leave and get in the portal. And sometimes it can be a little on the, I don't know, sneaky kind of side.
That's a good point Glenn made about talking to the athletes and finding out from them. So what's the program really like? I won't name the athlete or the school, but there is a Canadian at one school. She contacted me to tell me about this horrible situation she's in. Not that I could, mend it for her. I gave her a couple suggestions, but her reason for telling me this was to make sure that I told people, don't come to this school. Like when she first went there, she had a great coach. And then after being there a year or two, then the new coach came along and things are like totally different. So she just wanted me to tell people not to go to that school. I won't say what that school is here on this Zoom call, but if anyone asks privately, I might mention it. But anyway, yeah, talk to the athletes, get the real scoop and not just the sugar-coated, this is our school and this is how wonderful it is, what the coach has to say. And and see how many people are leaving that program and not just the ones that are signing with that school.
These are all great points. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Brett, looking out for me, not having my mic muted. So thank you. Thank you for that. It's been a bit since I've been a host, so I appreciate you. Okay, I got two questions. One's going to fall into, I'll give you that just a little tidbit, back of the mind. My last question is going to be, you said, something that you would ask the coach. So it'll be something to do. Give me a key question to ask on your recruit trip. That's the one, but you can think on this before I get so here's my pre-question, because I think it'll be fairly quick. So if a high school, this is from the audience, and it got taken away who asked this. If a high school sophomore is performing well, so based on the recruiting standards, that they have a good idea of the academic program that they're interested in. So they kind of have this idea. Should they contact the coach before, or the program before that June 15th deadline? Or I guess that start date? Should they actually reach out to the university coach? Or is that not needed?
My suggestion on this, Glenn, Carmyn, Kurt, let me know what you think. My suggestion would be it's unnecessary. What might happen is that you send that email off to the coach. They're not allowed to talk to you about recruiting, so they put you into a spreadsheet or something for later, and then maybe send you an email after June 15th. But most likely, you're going to hear back from them when you follow up after that date. Would be the suggestion there. I've spoken to some grade 9, 10, and 11 athletes recently, and a lot of these kids are on top of their stuff, really excited to get going and get on to the next step. But when let's even use a grade 11 as an example. My advice to these athletes is to have a very good idea of what their expectations are, set some goals, but not necessarily to be putting things in stone just yet, because how easy it is to improve from grade 10 to grade 11 on the track or jump pit or throw, whatever your event is leaps and bounds compared to once we get into senior or even into university. You're growing and you're probably going to run significantly faster than you did last year. So instead of saying, this is the school that I'm dead set on at this point in time, let's say that's the top of your list for now, but go have a fantastic outdoor season And think about these couple times that I'm going to tell you about, because they could open up other doors for you. And then let's check back in a few months. So I hope that answers the question. The coaches who try to skirt around that June 15th rule, again, Glenn, Carmyn, I don't know if you would have seen anything like this being in the NCAA, but I've talked to some coaches who, might send out a survey to those kids, and they're allowed to ask them questions like, choose a pizza type between cheese and pepperoni. And that's just to collect contact information so that they can follow up with you at a later date. But really, those coaches, their time is on next fall and the fall after. And if you're not into those kind of time periods yet, your name will just end up on a spreadsheet until it's time.
Yeah, as someone who's worked, in the NCAA just, really recently, like, unless you're really elite, sophomores, like, we don't really pay much attention to. It's like, juniors, and we'll usually focus on juniors and seniors at those times. One thing, if you do send a message early, like, don't feel offended if they don't respond. Like, we get just totally bombarded with stuff. And if someone's not very good, sometimes I usually try to respond. I just say like, hey, thanks for reaching out. When you get to maybe a little higher level or something like that, I'll be happy to hear more about what you're doing, or just keep me in the loop of how you're improving. I'll send an email like that sometimes. Sometimes you're just totally overwhelmed and it's hard to keep up. And so if you send one and you don't hear from a coach, and then you improve your performances, don't be shy to send another one and another one. And I've had people that I've had kind of limited contact with, and they might send me an email, and I'll say like, if you jump around here or throw around here, we'll be able to talk, and I might be able to do something for you. And then sure enough, like, they just keep being contacted, and then like they hit the marks I actually ask for. I've had it happen quite often actually. And it's kind of a cool, they're interested. And but if we're often really swamped. So just, if you don't get a response, don't worry about it. It's just don't take it personal. Because I know sometimes the high school athletes will put this heartfelt letter in, and tell them how they really love the school or whatever, and then they don't get a response, and they're kind of like, oh no, they don't like me or something. Like, almost the most important thing is just like the performances you do and how many points you could possibly score. So do you have like an event that you can score in the conference? Do you have a second event? Do you look like someone who could make nationals? Like, points per scholarship is like the most important thing we look at. And so if you don't fit in that mark quite yet, then you're, lower priority. But if you're as far as sophomores, and unless you're really, really elite, and then if you're at a big school and you're really, really elite, you want to go there, then they'll be interested and they'll keep up. But like, often even like, everyone wants to, it all kind of like all the big schools kind of pick their people, and then it goes to the next tier and the next tier. And so the people that are have the really elite performances get more contact early. And then and even if you're at one of those mid-major schools and some of these elite kids contact you, like, it's it's sometimes you'll keep in touch with them, but then they hit a little high performance and they'll go to the bigger school. Like, everyone's kind of trying to go to the biggest schools they can, is how it tends to go. And so if you're really elite, you're going to get contacted and you'll be found. But juniors, even juniors, a lot of times don't get much attention unless they're really special.
Oh, that's perfect. That's exact. This makes sense. That's it. I think you touched on it great. You said, don't feel offended if we don't contact you. Keep progressing. It's don't worry about that first date. That June, like, just a little contact after that date, and then there we go. I think this is perfect. Okay. I'm very cognizant of time. We're over. I know we're 13 minutes over. Can I ask you one final question? It's just a quick one. You can like just 1 point, 1 or 2 if you want. And I just curious if I asked this last time, so we'll see if it changes. But if you have a top question an athlete should be asking the coaches during the initial conversation. So thinking about top question, 1 or 2 if you want, just 1 is fine, but just what you would suggest they ask for this when they're in this recruiting kind of process. Okay, let's say specific that you're on the recruiting trip. How about that? Okay, you're all thinking about it. Good. First person to demute can start. Then your answer also won't get taken. Think about that. Do 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 do. Just or just a good question that we should, that an athlete should be asking. If that helps. Yeah, Kurt, you boom. Yes.
I think oftentimes, as an athlete, you want to know what the coach is thinking or what the coach is looking for. So I would think I would have an athlete ask the coach, like, what are they looking for in a typical athlete that they recruit? So that you have a feel, you have an understanding. If it doesn't mesh or it doesn't jive with what you are or what you're looking for in a coach, you have a pretty good understanding right away if this is going to be a good fit for you or not. Similar to what, Carmyn was saying, like you're going to know right away. If the coach comes in and says, I'm looking for, smash mouth type of athlete, one that, is in my face and, and love and all these different things, and that's just not your personality, you're probably going to sit there and say, you know what? I don't get a good vibe here. Maybe I need to look at another location or another place, or maybe, that's a red flag for me or whatever it is. So I would say, maybe, in asking as an athlete, asking a coach a question, ask them, what are they looking for? What's a typical athlete like here? What's the typical athlete like who, performs well in your program? If you're not a docile person and you're, a very boisterous person, and that sort of butts heads with that type of coach, then maybe that's not a good, mixture or setup for you as an athlete, and you might want to reconsider. So that would be my advice.
I like that. Yeah. Get that first feel right away. I like that. Brett.
Jump in quick.
Yep.
I think this conversation is often really focused on the athletic component. So I would ask the question, where do I study, eat, and live? I've talked to a lot of student athletes who've been through the university track and field experience, and so often we're talking about track. But the majority of your time on campus is going to be spent as a first-year student in your dorm room, in the dining hall, on campus outside of the athletic department. So for sure, the coach who's recruiting you is going to make sure you see the athletic department, you see those facilities, you meet the teammates, ask all the athletic questions that Kurt was talking about for sure, but don't neglect the other parts. Understand where you'll be living, where you'll be studying, what the rest of campus looks like. And then, like I said, yeah, what you'll be eating too. I've heard some students who just, the worst part of their whole experience was the fact that they had certain diet limitations and they didn't realize till the first day of school that the dining hall didn't serve anything they could eat and it impacted them athletically, right? So I would say just try and absorb the big picture on your visits. What is life like here? Not just what is life like in lane 1 or 2 on the track, but what's life like if I was to live here?
One point I'd like to make is just ask the athletes why they chose the school, and ask the coach why they chose why the athletes came here. There's a lot of really interesting things about the schools, and just find like which schools have real pride about why they chose that school. I've worked at one particular school, and when I came in as a coach, I asked the athletes as I met with them the first time, why did you choose the school? The answer was, they gave me this much money. They gave me more money. Probably had 10 athletes on the team in my group, and like 8 of them said they chose the money. So it was like their lower choice of a school. What's special about the school? That's those kind of questions, like why, and why did you come here? When I went to UT as well, UT Austin, and everyone at school is wearing UT Austin. You ask someone why they went there, it's UT. It's just like you see burnt orange everywhere, and there's a ton of pride about the school. And that it's important. I mean, people chose that school. Why did they do it? Sometimes it was a last resort. Sometimes it was close to home, and maybe everyone's close to home. And is that a good fit for you when you're from Canada? I think that's an important question that gets to the root of why other people chose that school, and you'll find some interesting answers.
That's perfect. Yeah, I like that. Carmyn, do you have final?
Well, all the ideas and questions that have been mentioned are fantastic. And mine is kind of related to the financial side of things. And hopefully you wouldn't have to ask the question, that the coach would, share that information with you. But there's some schools that have, deals for Canadians, and some schools that have deals based on academics, and you want to find out what those are. And I'm not promoting these schools, but I have heard of these situations. But for example, in the state of Maine, there's in-state fees and then there's out-of-state fees. And if you're from Canada, you can go to Maine for the same cost as in-state. Now, if you lived in Wyoming or New York or one of those other states, well, that's out of state, so that's going to cost more. So it's good to know that, oh, so there's a bit of an advantage for Canadian dollar-wise to go to that particular school. Or another one, again, I'm not promoting it, but I'm just aware of the situation, and that's at Long Beach State. Same thing, in state, out of state. But if you're out of state and after your first year, if you show that you can get a GPA of 3.0 or above, boom, then you get to stay at school at the same cost as in state. So that definitely, reduces the financial burden of going to some of these schools. Because again, going to school in the United States is way more costly than it is going to Canada. And then of course we've got to factor in that Canadian dollar. But yeah, that was sort of a new thing at Long Beach State, and it was all based on academics. And in-state, here's the fee. Out of state, there's the fee. But hey, you show us that you can get a 3.0, and then we'll reduce things so it's equivalent to in-state. So sort of, getting around that question. But again, hopefully the coach would be forthcoming and say, hey, we offer this, and or because they're trying to get you to go to their school. But yeah, get their advice to as Brent mentioned, the financial puzzle. See how things can work so that you can afford to go to a particular school, whether it's north of the border or south of the border.
I like this. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, especially when you're talking partial rides as well, right? Like that's going to play a factor in on that side of things. So that's a great point. But you're right. Hopefully they're fully transparent with that right away. Okay, so I'm very cognizant. This was amazing. Thank you. This was round 2. I loved it. Again, I got to what I had 17 questions. I think I got to 6 or 7. We got a couple, a few audience questions. So like this is awesome. We had a great discussion. So I really appreciate you all taking the time. Brett, thank you. So I'll put your contact stuff in. It'll be on the YouTube channel. You've shared it. So this is great. We can get a contact with you. Carmyn, thank you for coming out here. I really appreciate that. Taking the time. Like this is great. Sharing your experiences. Coach Glenn, Coach Kurt, I really appreciate you taking the time as well. This is a great discussion. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and kind of just your experiences through this. I think we really benefited from this. Carmyn, you high-fiving me or question?
Not high-fiving you. But no, what I was thinking, and I should have thought of this beforehand, but Kurt, you should have given Kyle your slide that was on social media, because it's a pretty cool one that was up just recently, but it was like the athletes that have come out of his Border City Track
Oh,
Club,
I saw
and all the
that.
different schools that they've gone to, both, again, north and south of the border. We're not here just to promote the US schools, but first of all, that goes to show that Kurt's on them academically and encourages them all to go to post-secondary schools. And hopefully that'll increase our, what was it, less than 10% of the track and field athletes in high school go on to college. But yeah, that's definitely not the case in Windsor with Kurt. So he's definitely on it academically. And yeah, athletes from his club are everywhere. So anyway.
It was a great. I did see that one. It was great.
Okay.
Yeah, your socials are awesome, by the way. But
Thanks
I
for
did see that one. Yeah, that was really cool
thanks for
post. Yeah.
the kind
Yeah.
words. Yeah, appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Everyone, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate that. We're just getting some thank yous from the audience as well. This was awesome. So thank you so much. All right, everyone have a great night. Thank you again.